Yo, what's going on? All my stunt wood artists, my TikTokers, my YouTubers, my Instagrammers, and normies out there, coming at you again with my spin on an old school favorite. Much love to the Grossos. Oliver out there still pushing. Man, your dad was freaking amazing. I've been trying to cover the spectrum of the love letters. I do realize I'm kind of responding to somebody else's clips, but I'm going to eventually get to the Vans clips that are over half an hour in length. Matter of fact, I actually look forward to that. But you know what I like to try to do with my followers, my viewers, even people that are on my Manbaerpigg radio channel on TikTok from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I kind of like everybody pick the format, and me being a parent of 3 girls, you got to kind of start them off in littler bites before we get to the actual big food. As always, I've always had that Jeff Phillips kind of mentality to skateboarding, where you know what, skateboarding doesn't owe you shit. If anything, it owes you wheel bite in the rain. Rest in peace, Jeff Phillips. Rest in peace, Jeff Grosso. Not trying to bite, not trying to ball bag ride, but you know, this is definitely one in my wheelhouse. But now let's go ahead and get into the letters today. If you like how it's going, and if you like the flow of the show, leave a comment and subscribe. Now let's go ahead and get into this, shall we?
Yeah, welcome back to the letters.
You know what gets me though? I've always liked how, especially in these clips from this channel, I don't think this is the actual Vans channel, but I've noticed, like even the beginning of the intro, like the bumpers and the banners, it eventually started off with like a cartoony California vibe to it. Then it started getting more aggro. Now it's starting to get more like animation feel. But today the Grossman's going to be talking about West Coast Vert, Vert skate ramps, kind of like in the homemade, DIY sense of the word. Me being from Florida, we always read these guys, and we've always saw the zines. Yes, what are zines? Zines are man-made production that, skaters, artists, musicians, basically they were like the marquee, but they were like handwritten notes, flyer McGillicuddies. We would this is back in the days of street teams where we would literally go out and skate. And even we'd try to get to those fools that were hiding up underneath a rock. We were definitely bringing a lot of people that looked at skateboarding on the fringes, on the outside of the rail. I think we may even converted a few posers. I don't use that word in a harsh sense of the word. Sometimes a poser is somebody who really just wants to get into the culture, but's just too afraid to commit. So rather than freaking put all his eggs into that cart, they just fake the funk. You can't hate. Like me, they're like, oh, well, Manbaerpigg, well, what do you think when you see like Miley Cyrus with like a Thrasher t-shirt? I'm like, man, what did the freaking Joker and Batman used to always say about press? Good press or bad press. It's neither, it's all press the same. But speaking of press, let's press on to this video.
West Coast Love Letters. We're figuring it out right now.
West Coast
Where's ramps?
Mecca.
I thought you were talking about ramps.
We are.
I thought you were just talking about West Coast or ramp.
The Bill Murray of skateboarding. He's the Cinderella boy. It's the Bill Murray of skateboarding. Mr. Lance Mountain. Definitely one of my favorite skateboarders. He's the Cinderella boy. But yeah, sorry, I'm going to chime into the video periodically. The way I think of it like this, when they talk about the West Coast scene, being an East Coast skater myself, we grew up in, with skateboard magazines like Transworld and Thrasher and Action Sports. And they would have like marquee and segments and spotlight, but every time the spotlight or the main majority of the photographs and the magazine articles were always leaned forward to what was the scene happening in Venice, what was the scene happening in San Fran, what was the scene happening in Santa Monica, what was happening at Del Mar, what was happening at Pipeline. You heard a shout out of Kona here in Florida every now and again, especially in the earlier publications. Kona did get a lot of love. And this is actually way before Woodward, the skateboarding school, started to pop off. This is in the days of the Vision tryouts, the Santa Monica Airlines, before it eventually turned Santa Cruz. So let's go ahead and get into this. Like, for instance, yes, I'm from Florida, East Coast born, East Coast love, East Coast all the freaking way. But when you think of it like this, the inner skater in me, the inner Thrasher, is like a Muslim when they view, at the holy site. The holy site for every skateboarder, and I will die on this hill and prove me wrong if in the chat if I'm wrong, but Southern California will always be Mecca.
Ramps.
I don't know. I'm supposed to say love letters.
Love letters. West Coast ramps.
West Coast.
Ramps. Talking about ramps.
Yes.
Wamps. A wamp wat. No, really, they had a board called the Ramp Rat. Steve O's first board.
The birth of the ramp was Evel Knievel.
Before we get back to racing, I'd like to introduce to you most
We're not
unusual
worthy.
young man.
We're not
this is
worthy.
Evel Knievel. And
Evel
his specialty
Knievel.
in sports is to take a motorcycle up over a ramp and leap through the air some 90 feet. That's what he's
Every
been
kid
trying to do
liked
today.
Evel Knievel in the 70s.
Not just the 70s, it rolled over into the 80s as well. We all wanted to jump ramps, get air. Most of the times it was our fathers or, our best friend's dad putting in the work. Cool thing about them older skateboarding magazines, they would literally, in the magazines, they would have dimensions for ramps back in the days. And this, it was amazing. And you'd give them dimensions to like your pops or to an older adult, and it was just like either a Sunday or a weekend working on a badass launch ramp. And once you got the ramp or mini ramp or even like a kicker, once you got them, because you had a few of them, you had a slap rail and you had a launch ramp back in the 80s. In my cul-de-sac, yeah, we had the slap rail, maybe a board slide grind rail, but always the launch ramp, and it was painted blue, and it had all kinds of the bands we liked on it, like Black Flag, freaking DRI, Agent Orange. I put skulls on it, painting it up, man, all thinking we were either Gator or freaking Caballero or freaking Hawk coming off of them rants. Jason Jesse type twist up into that moth, tucking that knee. That's one thing I like about Grosso. He's raw with that. You gotta tuck that knee, for real, for real.
And he launched off of things over things, and so kids went out and got a brick and laid a piece of wood up it and went off it.
Guilty.
That's the birth of the ramp.
Yes.
That's
Then they
fixed
stuck it up
here,
against a wall.
Spielberg. I mean,
And
not
then they stuck another board,
Lance.
and it started making tranny. Dink, 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 dink. Then they put another piece of wood over it, and it made it smoother. Yeah. Kids made things to skate on.
Always made things to skate on, whether it be, adding that to the top of a parking block, or freaking like Slants Mountain said, getting a brick with just like a piece of wood on it. Yeah, definitely we're thinking beyond the realms of skateboarding, for sure. And then, we got hip to concrete as we grew older, but wood was definitely the starting point.
To find vertical. That's what ramps are.
And this was in the time when kissing tiles or touching tiles was the whoa moment, getting right there on the edge. Or coping was just something fools dropped in off. What you did with that momentum,
The first time I went over to his house to like hang out or whatever, and then get a ride down to the skate park. And I remember looking down at the ramp, going, "It was thrash." And then Skate City closed down. That was when he kind of started to fix his ramp up, and then we like kind of all shifted over there.
Heck yeah, and that's where you'll find all your radical Conklin footage. Definitely some of your like late 80s. Bones videos were shot at that ramp. Definitely the ramp is iconic.
Necessity, like it was just like, oh well, we're not going to quit.
It wasn't do-it-yourself because the stuff that exists isn't what you're into. It was do-it-yourself because nothing else existed.
Exactly. You did it yourself.
There was a scene, there was money, there was skate parks. It collapsed.
Y'all look like a bunch of do-it-yourselfers, babies.
The backyard scene was a conscious decision to try to create a pro scene. So we built ramps, or had ramps, or found a ramp.
We made our
went there with
scene.
all 12 pros in the world, made an article pretending it's something to get other people to do it. I mean, that's the whole point of doing these articles or doing these contests, is to get other kids to do it.
Oh, this is probably the best ramp I've ever seen.
Boosting the scene.
And I'm sure with exposure that a lot of
We
kids in
didn't
their
need
backyards
birds to boost our cred. We
They had
did
to
it
build
in
their
our
own
moves. Neil
industry.
Lander.
So they promoted it and did
Godhead.
these things to like get other people to do these things.
Hey,
what do you say we all go skate around?
Skate.
Alright, let's go.
Yes. Gator. Do y'all remember now? Lester. Let's go skating. Skate Visions. Oh, I'm glad they brought this up. I would freaking for days and hours be studying Mark's feet patterns on where, see, I had to pause it right here. I'm glad I got it in this shot. I would obsess how my fake foot placement would be on the skateboard, and just looking like how Mark's got his back towards, I would imitate him move for move. I would actually, since Florida's like flat, I would find like an incline just so I could practice my shoves. And I think freaking, I know I may freaking be the only one that thinks this, but I think he had the prettiest shoves because they looked effortlessly. And what really pisses me off about Mark Rogowski is that he was one of them one trick freaking ponies that refused to try to freaking go street skate, and when he tried, they freaking made fun of him. But if you looked at his early career, he did have that street freaking charisma. That's where we all learn. He just happened to be a vert king. And then, you know, the dastardly thing happened, and like all skate followers when you're young, you never wonder why, you know, crickets, because I didn't hear anything after like 90, 91. Well, after 91.
Once you saw this.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to freaking condone or, you know, excuse, but it must be highlighted. It's a part of my upbringing.
And you're fucking swing set. Really?
Yeah.
That was locked in. After that, it was like
Vision,
it was like,
baby.
Snake charming, like.
And that's when all the fat suits started coming in. They saw all this aggro in business, and you know, they weren't even skaters themselves, but they saw all these young folks making their moves on the ramps and getting their freaking highs in the air, and they saw dollar signs like your Brad Dorfins and your Stacy Peraltas and your Novaks and all. You know, they knew what they were doing. They were just trying to make money. And this was back before it was all in the skaters' hands. This is back when the fat suits owned the top three companies, I think. The top three companies when I skated when I was a kid were Vision, Santa Cruz, and Powell. If you weren't one of those, you were nothing.
Neil Blender called me up one day. Said he'd get a camera. You're working for Transworld. I was like, what's Transworld? Because it's a new magazine. You're going to do an article. You get to lay it out yourself. That's how Ramp Book came out. It was just like, let's just go around and shoot photos of kids that have their ramps. And that was our best excuse of like trying to make an article saying, hey, just make it yourself.
Well,
So
see, that's one thing. Transworld was always a decent magazine, but they were always a little bit too goody two shoes. Hell, even their first episode in Transworld was all about Johnny B. Good type ish. But no, I leaned more towards Thrasher, and then later in the 90s, in the mid 90s, I leaned more towards Big Brother. CCS was Godhead.
People started building ramps in their backyards, and pros started building them in their yards. And
I emphasized that. It was basically, that's where you'd find all your ramp dimensions, and your drawings were in these skate magazines.
Contests and events started being in the backyard because it had to be.
Cab built his 12-foot wide vert ramp in his backyard out of necessity. Lopes built his ramp. He probably had the premier ramp up in the Bay
It was
Area
okay.
for that
Hawk
period of
had the
time.
better ramp out
So
of
they
all of
held
them, I
Joe's
think.
Ramp Jam.
But if you want to ask me, nothing can be more iconic than the chin ramp. The Search for Animal chin ramp, that's iconic. Have you seen him?
And you had all the Texas boys building, you know,
Pineapple,
P-ramp,
Johnson,
blue ramp, clown ramp.
Schneer.
I don't even know like what comes first.
Phillips.
My brother would take like all the instructions from Thrasher, and so we'd sneak across the canyon and into the construction sites and steal as much wood as we could, you know. We'd drag this plywood and 2x4s into the canyon.
But see, it wasn't more like stealing. I actually got permission from the construction workers, and all their pieces that were under 4 foot or their throwaways, I'd ask them if they'd make a pile for me or set them to the side, and I'd make my own pile. A lot of our ramps were scab jobs. That's when you have to basically scab plywood together and marry it underneath with a 2x4. But man, they held steady and they would always roll. Free stuff.
And sometimes, you know, we just wouldn't make it all the way home. We'd just get the wood to a certain spot in the canyon, and that's where the ramp would
even the screws and the nails, sometimes we'd take them out of the construction material, bend the nails straight, and reuse them. Because, you know, we had our parents and uncles and adults build the first ramp, but once they showed us the know-how and how to take off, use tape measures, hand tools, and how to get everything cut and, you know, pre-made, we took off on our own designs, you know, because thing is that the adults always made the ramps at about like maybe 2 foot. We wanted to make them bigger, and the adults were busy, and we took off like freaking like a wildfire.
Up like
that's how I treat most of my building skills
anymore. Like, let's put it here.
Child building ramps in Southwest Florida.
Just being in someone's backyard and not at a skate park and not like being supervised, you know, and not having random people watch you.
Screw the rules.
You know,
we have the ramp.
You're not putting on a show for anyone.
Yeah.
It's just backyard.
It's not about putting up a show. Because most of these spots in the 80s, like Delmar, Pipeline, Keyhole, a lot of these Kona, a lot of them skate parks, and even now to this very day, require you to sign some type of paperwork, excluding liability. Most of these skate spots, especially the skate park in Cape Coral, the Eagle Skate Park, requires their patrons to wear a helmet every time they're there, and also sign a liability agreement. You know, that's one thing that I despise the most about living in Florida. When I lived in Colorado, man, you didn't need that crap. That's why I say I haven't ever got to skate Mecca or go to California. Shoot, you can always fund me in the chat, or freaking we'll talk. You know, we'll do some talk. You know, we'll sit down and we'll talk. You know, I want to freaking hit up California before I die. I want to skate it. I don't care how old I am, and it's always been a feather in the cap that I want to get. But as far as I've ever got out towards the west coast of Colorado, North Glen, Fort Collins, the Front Range, they got a sick ass skate scene there. One thing that sticked out to me when I lived out in Colorado was the Nightmare at North Side, where everybody would dress up as Halloween characters and get their skate on. You see Beetlejuice out there doing hand plants. You'll see you'll see the chick from The Grudge doing a manual or a nose wheelie. Yeah, I called it a nose wheelie because I think manuals are stupid. I used to call them wheelies. But then again, I digress.
Ramp style.
It was a really, really magical, small moment in time for skateboarding, and we used to laugh about it, make fun of it.
I agree. Grosso may say that they laughed and it was this and that in the skateboarding, but when you think about us as kids, we looked up to these gods like they were Vert gods. Like, wow. Just imagine if I ever got the courage to drop in from like a 12-foot ramp. What would you do? Like in Speed, what would you do? What would you do? Do you bail or commit? That is the question.
Discounted nowadays that this even fucking happened. But it was a magical, neat moment where it was a bunch of kids making shit happen for themselves. Period.
The heyday of backyard hotness is late 83 till they went into the arena around 86.
Vision, skate. This is the actual contest where I think Hasoi won the Big Air.
Tony,
And then it turned into, oh, this is what skateboarding is. Let's build these and put them in arenas and skate the same thing and do the same thing until street skaters make it interesting for someone else because what we're doing is terrible. That's what happened, I think.
Pretty much. So that's it. West Coast Ramps. Tune in next time. And we're headed east. Unleashed in the east.
Wagons east.
I want to show you photos of Blaze.
Yeah.
Cedar Crest Red.
Yeah, Cedar Red.
That's about it. Thanks for watching.
You'll find that Cedar Red video in the Molecules in Motion by Goldwing video. And as always, thanks for tuning in to the letters. Much love to Vans, Team Grosso, and everyone that's participated or skated in the video. And as always, if you like what I'm doing, you know what to do. Same pig time, same pig channel for the letters. Peace.